Doctor, will you please tell the counselors what you have told me?
Yes, of course. And some of what I will tell you relates to events in the future. Not only on this planet, but also on others whose existence you don't even know of. But my knowledge is scientific fact. Now, Davros has created a machine creature, a monster, which will terrorize and destroy millions and millions of lives and lands throughout all eternity. He has given this machine a name, a Dalek. It is a word new to you. But for 1,000 generations, it is a name that will bring fear and terror. Now, undoubtedly, Davros has one of the finest scientific minds in existence. But he has a fanatical desire to perpetuate himself in his machine. He works without conscience, without soul, without pity. And his machines are equally devoid of these qualities.
Hello and welcome to Who Watches Who, a Doctor Who podcast with me, Matthew, and as always, I am joined with...
Hello, it's Scott. It's Scott. That was a long whiff.
Hello, Scott. This week we are continuing our dive through Genesis of the Daleks, which we began last week. So if you missed last week's episode, I highly recommend going back and listening to last week's episode for some fun. How did this episode first get made and the career of, let me try and guess his name, Dalek Man, don't remember his name. Oh well. What was his name?
Terry Nation.
He's
like one of the most famous sci-fi creators of all time.
Sounds like a fake name though. Sounds like a fake name. But yeah, we dove into the career of Terry Nation last week and then looked at the first two episodes of Genesis of the Daleks. Scott has got a bit more Writer's Corner this week before we dive into episodes 3 and 4 of Genesis of the Daleks. So Scott, why don't you just immediately take it away from me?
Yeah, this week we're looking at the director of the episode or story, David Maloney. He has directed the second most Doctor Who episodes, right behind Douglas Camfield, who we talked about in The Time Meddler. He's directed 46 episodes in total, which is mental.
That's a lot. That is a lot.
So he started his career as a journalist. He was a journalist for Birmingham's Evening Dispatch for 5 years. He wanted to act. He had about 8 years of work in theatres in the West End of London, which is a long time, and he grew tired of acting in 1961 and decided to join the BBC as a floor manager. When he applied, he was warned on the appointments board that he would never, ever, ever have the opportunity to become a director.
That's so. That was very true then. Clearly very true.
His first ever gig on Doctor Who was as an assistant to Christopher Barry on The Romans, and with Douglas Camfield again on The Time Meddler, which we kicked off a year on, which was a very good story.
Yeah, I very much enjoyed The Time Meddler. Probably one of the best Hartnell episodes there is.
It's slim pickings.
It is indeed.
In 1965, he walked into the studio to see the crew shooting The Web Planet, which is an episode we've both seen.
It sucks. It completely stopped me watching through Classic Who. Like, that episode, dead in its tracks, stopped me being able to watch through Classic Who in like release order. Because I got to that story and I just didn't want to continue because I was like, I can't get through this. It's painful.
I feel you, bro. It's probably an episode we will never cover.
Well, we'll run out of episodes eventually. Eventually, we will have to cover.
Oh no! Just imagine us being like 55 years old having to do Web Planet.
Yeah.
So he was very highly impressed with the enormous scale of some of the insect creatures. Like, the idea that we were doing something so huge in such a small studio with a tiny budget really impressed him. Which, the outfits in that story is pretty darn good for the time.
They're bad. They're bad outfits. They are hilariously bad.
Um,
The ideas behind them, like a giant ant and a giant bee, sure, the idea behind it is very creative, and the ambition behind it is to be applauded. The execution, however, leaves stuff to be desired.
well, the Web Planet is a story with a lot of smearing of the cameras. Like every shot is blurry for some reason. There's also a lot of buzzing, yeah.
Yeah.
But whenever you can
terrible.
actually see the costumes, I was pretty impressed. It's more like performance art than an actual.
I was in stitches laughing every time I saw it because those bee people looked ridiculous.
So he loved the imagination behind the Web Planet, which led to him taking part in the BBC's director's course, which he completed in 1968, and he was soon contacted to be the director on 3 stories for season 6, The Mind Robber, The Crotons, and The War Games. So he directed 19 episodes of a 44-episode season.
Jesus Christ, that what a workload! What a workload that is to undertake.
Yeah, that sounds so rough of a schedule for a first-time director. It's insane.
Yeah.
Surprisingly,
Well, I mean,
sorry.
if you love it, it's great. I would honestly kill for the BBC to give me 19 projects to direct. Like,
How about a remake of the Web Planet?
oh, yeah, easy, because I can't make it any worse.
So after these 19 episodes, he took a 4 years break from his show, which I don't blame him. He wanted to become a freelance director to become more mobile with other projects. He returned to direct Planet of the Giants in the Pertwee era. Sorry, Planet of the Daleks, not the Giants. Before returning 2 years later on Genesis of the Daleks, so he was very into the Dalek stories for a while. On Planet of the Daleks, he discovered that shooting the Daleks on location was a nightmare, so in Genesis he focused on keeping the Daleks entirely studio-based, like even recreating battlefields in the studio, just so... Because doing Daleks on the streets in 1970, whatever, was a nightmare. They're just wobbling about all over the place.
Doing any sort of robotic creature that doesn't have legs back then was a nightmare. I mean, K9, very famously, a nightmare dog. Like,
Bad dog.
yeah.
After Genesis, he directed 3 more stories: Planet of Evil, The Deadly Assassin, which is one of the best stories ever made. We need to do that very soon. And The Talons of Ren Chang. Terry Nation said that the production value on Genesis was the best in years, and he considered it to be the best Doctor Who story for that reason. And also, I guess because he has an ego and it's also his writing, but let's ignore that part. So Maloney wound up as the producer on Blake 7 between 1977 and 1979 for this reason, which again, just bringing up Blake 7.
Yeah, it's always coming up. It's always popping up its head. I know nothing about it other than the name. It's such a fascinating piece of sci-fi medium, we have access to it. I could watch Blake 7 right now if I wanted to, and I'm not going to. You know?
We need to find a way of doing it. It'd be fun. Colin Baker's in Blake 7.
Interesting.
After Blake 7, he produced the last series of When the Boat Comes in 1981, as well as a BBC adaptation of A Day of the Triffids, which I don't know. I've never seen any of those.
I've never heard of either of them. Yeah.
After this, he began to travel the world, producing various documentaries for ITV, with his last credited show being Family Pride, which was a short-lived 1991 soap opera. He would provide commentaries on various Doctor Who and Blake 7 DVDs through the late 90s to the early 2000s. He sadly died in 2006, aged 73. So that's David Maloney.
Excellent. What a busy man. An interesting career. Tell you, the BBC back then was so different, wasn't it? You could just rock up to them, go to their director's school, and then work on Doctor Who for the next 20 years and you're sorted.
Oh, yeah. It sounds so much easier getting into the industry back then. As long as you're white.
Really does.
As long as you're a white
course.
man.
Yeah.
immediate
Yeah.
access.
You could just walk in the door and be like, "Can I have a job?" And they'd be like, "Do you have any qualifications?" "No, you're in." Like easy, easy.
Oh God, if we were
Wait,
so lucky.
yeah. I know, nightmare.
But do you want to
But
get into Genesis of the Daleks episode 3?
yeah, I guess. Let us dive in now to Genesis of the Daleks, Part 3.
This is the measure of my faith. Nida?
It is a simple chemical formula. If the substance is loaded into artillery shells and fired onto the surface of the Carlet dome, it will weaken the molecular structure and make it brittle. Your rocket will then be able to penetrate without resistance.
Why are you giving us this information? You know that your own people, the Carlids, will be utterly exterminated.
No price is too great to pay for peace. I only ask that when the war is over, I be allowed to help in the reconstruction of our planet.
We want only to see the conflict brought to an end. This formula gives you the power to bring that about.
By dawn tomorrow, our world could be at peace.
The episode begins way further back than the episode ended last week. We get a whole sequence of Sarah Jane climbing up the scaffolding and some people that are dressed weirdly like green superheroes. They're all in like green uniforms and have like these yellow eye goggles on that look like they're superhero masks. They make me think like, you know, like Robin's mask, you know, where it's just like an eye covering.
It makes me
That's
think
what
of
it looks like to me. And
what is it called? The Aquabats? Are they, you know, the singing group of superheroes? Do you know what I'm on about?
I don't know what you're on about. The Aquabats. Oh, okay. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, I actually do know what you're on about. I recognize these people. They're a American rock band.
Yeah, I don't know what their deal is. I don't know if they come
Interesting.
from a TV show or what, or are they for kids? I don't know.
They're a band.
Are they
They're
for
a band.
kids though?
I don't know
think,
if they're for kids or if they're like a comedy band.
I think we just had a TV show.
The
that
Aquabats are an
ended-
American.
Yeah, the Aquabat show, and I think Jack Black was in their series final apparently. So that was cool. I saw that.
Interesting.
Jack Black is cool.
They look like they would be for kids, but also they look like they're like a comedy group for like people on the internet. So, oh my god, their website has an amazing font.
What font is it?
Okay, so they're currently on tour with Bowling for Soup,
Nice.
or they will be later this year. So I guess they're a band
I'm
for
ki-
adults because Bowling for Soup's not a band for kids.
Yeah, but didn't Bowling for Soup do the theme song to Jimmy Neutron? There's some crossover.
But Jimmy Neutron's not for kids. Jimmy Neutron's a grown up. Jimmy Neutron's for grown ups. Right?
Yeah, sure. Whatever you say. What are we talking about? How did we get to here, this conversation?
Hang on. I'm trying to. Their lyrics seem relatively clean, but
Yeah, the Aquabats Super
Well,
Show
also-
was created by the two creators of Yo Gabba Gabba.
interesting.
Do you remember Yo
I
Gabba Gabba?
I know the name. But I never watched it.
It's like one of the
Or
worst
the
kids shows I've
Acrobats
ever
for
seen.
kids.
Jack Black was also in Yo Gabba Gabba, so maybe he has connections to the two creators of it.
Okay, so the Aquabat Super Show is definitely for kids. So, but I don't know if the band. I guess oh my god, they're a ska band. Okay, so they're like a regular ska band that got a kids TV show. Amazing. Parents need to know that the Aquabat Super Show is a high-energy blend of campy superhero shows, think old-school Batman, and modern kids shows, which means lots of eye-candy noise, absurdity, and a surprising number of rather intense images that makes this a bit of a gamble for younger viewers. Sounds like the best show ever made.
On Wikipedia, one of the quotes is, if a person is over 30, I'd say it's like Batman meets the Monkees with a little bit of Sid and Marty Krofft in it. If they're under 30, I'd say Power Rangers meets Flight of the Conchords, which I feel like Flight of the Conchords would be the way you describe it to a person over 30, because under 30 don't know about Flight of the Conchords. I'm confused.
I don't know. I'm under 30, and I know about Flight of the Conchords. But back to the episode. Sarah Jane goes to fall off the scaffolding, and she just hits on a piece of flooring not that far down below her, so it's not that scary. And then she gets back up and they start climbing again, until they get captured at the top of the tower, where Sarah Jane is left standing by herself at the edge. And the guy's like, right, you gotta come across, you gotta come across. And then she falls, and he grabs her by the wrist. I really don't like this whole opening to the episode. It's a relatively action-packed way to open the episode to kind of suck you in, but all of the staging feels weird and kind of out of place. Nothing. I never get a sense really of where anybody is or what's really going on.
Yeah, I watch this all the time, so I'm coming to it as a perspective of it being a 70s show. And for a 70s show, I think it's pretty good model work mixed in between some actual sets. And obviously, we don't have a budget to actually make the whole thing look realistic, so we're trying our best, and I think it looks pretty decent for what it is.
Yeah, it looks decent for what it is. It goes on really long, and I don't care about what's going on, but there's a really dark line as well, where the guy that's holding Sarah Jane by the arm, he's like, they say people die if they fall from really long heights. They die before they hit the ground. I don't believe that. Do you? It's like, Jesus Christ, this is a children's show.
Yeah, he pushes Sarah Jane off of the edge, one of the foul soldiers, and then just holds her by the wrist, which is, Jesus, this really shows that the fouls are pretty bad. They're not the same fouls as in the very first appearance of them, where we're pacifists.
Anyway, yeah, the episode continues as we cut away from that scene to the Doctor and Harry walking through some caves as they're escaping through the prison. And this here we get a really important action scene. I think you'll agree. A really important character development, incredible storytelling as they come across a giant clam. And this giant clam then, does Harry just walk into it? I forget how he even... He does, doesn't he? He just walks into it like an absolute idiot.
Yeah, Harry Sullivan is an absolute imbecile, as the Doctor would say in multiple episodes. Yeah, he's basically the comic relief. He's almost as bad as Ian from the Dalek movies, but not quite as bad. So the whole clam thing is what people point to when they talk about filler inside of this episode. It's not the worst thing. We've had entire episodes which is just filler, like when Victoria is cooking in the kitchen in episode 3 of the what the fuck was the episode called again? Enemy of the World. Yeah, this isn't the worst filler we've seen on the show so far.
It's not, but it's maybe some of the silliest filler we've seen. Harry walking into a giant clam, and then a solid minute and a half of them trying to fight the clam to get it off Harry's leg is ridiculous. It's some of the most absurd filler we've had. Sarah Jane walking around a nuclear plant in dead silence for half an episode. Sure, that's really bad filler, but at least it's I don't know, normal. This is goofy. This is really goofy. It feels out of place in such a dramatic episode, you know, such a dramatic story where everything has been so relatively grounded and relatively like, you know, oh God, is this the right thing to do? Is what's going on? We're creating the Daleks. This is kind of scary. And then there's like a giant clam eats Harry's leg. It's such a left turn for the episode to suddenly take, you know?
The whole concept of the Doctor and Harry exploring the wilderness, encountering Davros's failed experiments is such a fun concept in theory. It feels very 70s, you know. It feels like it comes direct from a 70s horror movie, like a B horror movie. And you're right, it is very silly, which is funny when Terrence Dicks describes the final outcome of this episode. He's like, it's very good. There's a few moments where I would change it so, you know, it's lighter in tone. And I feel this is as light as it gets throughout the entire story. This is a very light moment. The clam itself is all. I really don't mind it.
This is definitely the lightest it gets, because it gets pretty miserable in the second half of this story, and the part 4 is a miserable time as well. But it's good. It's decent. The Doctor and Harry then come across some bars in which the Doctor tries to rip them open like he's some sort of superhero, and Harry comes to help him, and he's like, they're pretty rusted, let's pull these open. Which I feel like there could have been an easier, like, why don't you get like a rock and try to like bash it or something? Like, your first instinct is, I'm going to stretch these bars. I'm not going to try and break my way through or cut my way through. I'm going to stretch them with my big strong muscles.
To be fair on Harry, it does look pretty weak, you know. It does move quite considerably because it's 1970s Doctor Who and everything moves so easily.
Yeah, that's true. We then cut to Davros flipping everybody off, giving everybody the finger as he's talking to other Daleks and his lackey dude. I make this joke because the back of his armrest looks like a middle finger. It's hilarious. It's like Mickey Mouse giving you the middle finger. But they're talking about how great the Daleks are and how wonderful everything is. Nothing to worry about, and then my ITVX is going to load and I can't see what scene I'm actually looking at.
Nice.
Yes, this is then the scientists start talking to one another after Davros leaves, and I really like the scene where they're kind of talking in hushed tones. Like, yeah. I'm really worried about what we're doing. I don't think what we're doing is ethical at all. You know, we have to find a way to try and stop this, which is a recurring theme throughout this episode, where, you know, people aren't all agreeing with Davros. In fact, most of the Khalids don't agree with Davros, which was a really fun twist I liked in this story that I didn't see really coming, is the Khalids and the Thals kind of swap places on the morality side of things, don't they?
They do. It's really interesting. You know? Also, they really speak to each other in hushed tones, and it's very stage acting here, you know, because we're like 6 feet away from each other, really.
Yeah, they are. But, you know, that's stage acting is kind of the way that just things people acted back then, really, you know.
Especially on Doctor Who when there's only like 4 sets in total.
We then cut to a scene with this. It's like the Khalid like Congress of like opposition leaders and whatnot, speaking in more hushed tones, but they're having like a secret meeting where they're getting the Doctor to tell them, like, you know, everything he knows about the Daleks and what the Khalid people will turn into and things like that. And, you know, how did the Doctor get here?
We just saw him go through the wilderness to the college, to the Thals.
But he's just back in the base now.
To the Thals base.
And everyone's okay with it.
Yeah.
He's not with the Thals. He's with the Khalids right now.
Is he?
Yeah, you've even seen the Nazi dude that arrested him in the first place.
They're in this place because I don't know, I think it's in the middle ground or something, right? So it's like away from the Khalids.
But they've got the map in front of them. Like, it looks exactly the same as the map that they was getting interrogated with by the Nazi dude who's in this room with him right now.
No, well, God, I can't remember now. It doesn't matter.
Like the young dude. The young dude. He's standing right next to the Doctor. He's the guy that was interrogating him.
I don't know.
Like, He's just, don't worry about how the Doctor's there or where even they are. Like, it's the only bit where I was like, I like what they're talking about. It's really interesting, where the Doctor's giving this really, really good speech about how evil the Daleks are and all the things that he's seen them do and all the lives and things that they've taken and things like that. I was just thrown off. I was like, wait, what? Where is everybody right now? Last thing I saw was the Doctor was pulling bars apart. How did he get here? Who are these people? How did they talking to the Doctor? They know who the Doctor is. Oh, the Nazi dude's here. Why is he here?
Yeah, I guess, whatever.
Then we cut briefly to Sarah Jane with the Mutos in what continues to be the weakest story in this entire I'm trying to look for another word than story. Tale, I guess. The subplot with Sarah Jane is the least interesting thing, I think.
It's a common theme in Classic Who that whenever a female companion is split away from the Doctor, they're always given nothing to do. Like, we just saw it with Victoria in Enemy of the World. Oh yeah, just go into the kitchen and cook for us, I guess.
Yeah. This is better than that, at least.
Yeah.
Sarah Jane is she's trying, I think she's trying to just survive at this point, and it's not great. It's just, it suffers from being uninteresting because the Mutos don't really have like any sort of character or agency to them. They're just kind of abused the entire time by the Thals, which is a really good way of showing us that the Thals are pretty nasty dudes. It's just, I don't know, something about it doesn't work for me.
Yeah, there's a lack of agency in what Sarah Jane is doing, I think. In the original script, she was supposed to be suffering from radiation poisoning, but that was scrapped. I think it was because it was too similar to the very first Dalek story where everyone is suffering from radioactive poison and nin.
Yeah, I guess, but like, I mean, that could have been like a cool like homage. You could have done that as like an homage, like a nice little throwback to remember the last time, the first time with the Daleks here when everyone got sick. Now it's just Sarah Jane, lol. You could play off something interesting with that. Whereas here the radiation doesn't, like, Sarah Jane's like immune to the insane amount of radiation that she is absorbing. Like, they've showed us before, it's in toxic levels of radiation, and she's openly handling all these like radiation canisters while the Thals are in full Simpsons radiation suits. She should die. She should be dead.
Sarah Jane is an expert in radiation. As we've seen in The Hand of Fear.
Yes, she knows all about it. She had a very good tour of that facility. Then we get a scene that is good, although you pointed out as well that it would be better if it wasn't here, where we have head Nazi man talking with Davros, where he's talking about how the opposition is planning secretly to undermine Davros, and that the scientists, there's people working against Davros right now and they need to stop it. And Davros is like, this isn't the first time this has happened. There's often been people trying to stop my work, but we will never stop. And another thing that I did like about this, especially with Davros's performance in this episode, which you see more and more as it goes on, the more and more angry he gets and the more irritated he becomes, the more he starts sounding just like a Dalek.
Yeah.
He stops sounding like himself, and he just becomes like full robot voice.
Yeah, which is a great little addition to, and also his eye, which is in his forehead, it begins to light up, which you don't actually see very well because of the light inside of a studio. And also the battery's wound up running out, and it just broke in general because it's 1970s Doctor Who, so...
Because it's classic Who, yeah. Cool. The episode continues as we cut back to the Doctor and Harry, and they get told that the politicians have decided to suspend Davros's research and experiments for now until they can come to a formal decision on what to exactly do moving forward. And then the Doctor and Harry's like, oh wait, hang on, we need to find Sarah Jane as well. She's not with us. Where's Sarah Jane? And the Nazi dude's like, we've got spies with the Thals, by the way, and they say Sarah Jane's over there, so you guys might want to go over there to get Sarah Jane, but then I'm not helping you anymore. Although, like, as much as I'm, like, I don't know how I feel about this Nazi dude suddenly being on the Doctor's side and being okay with the Doctor. I do like the moment where he starts talking about something that Davros has done, or the shield that Davros has built over the city, so that they, the Thals don't stand a chance. And he's like, Davros is genius. He's just last month he managed, and he becomes all fervent again. And the Doctor's like, yeah, whatever, shut up. And then he kind of goes back to being this, like, oh yeah, I'm on your guy's side, where it's kind of like, this programming and this like brainwashing almost of following Davros no matter what is still inside of him, even if he doesn't fully believe it. That's part of him still can click into action when he's like, oh, but Davros did this amazing thing and he's so cool. I kind of like that, but I guess, just pacing in time and stuff, they didn't, for me anyway, they didn't really establish enough that this is the dude that is breaking away and he's okay with the Doctor and everything now. He's the one that's helping them out. It just feels like they picked a random guard from the previous episode.
I mean, I don't think the actual politicians of the Khaled race are evil. They're just normal politicians. I think Davros is the one that's evil, and everyone in his bunker is conditioned by Davros, but the councillors and all that, they don't know what's going on with Davros, so they're not brainwashed by him.
Yeah, I know, but I'm talking about the guard.
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure what the guard is. I'm not sure what his deal is in this episode. It feels rather contrived.
Yeah, but what are you going to do? We then cut immediately to the politicians telling Davros that they need to suspend all of his work and he needs to stop it, and he's got like 12 hours to do it. And I really liked this scene, mainly because it's not like a loud, evil, like, no, you will not shut me down. And Davros instead is like playing chess with him, where he's like, okay, I'm going to stop my plans. I completely agree with what you're saying. What you're saying makes sense. You can trust me. You guys should leave, and I'll do that now. The second you turn around and leave, I'm going to stop doing my work, just like I said. You're saying the work I'm doing, you don't know if it's good, or you don't know if you can trust me. You can trust me to stop doing it. I swear. It's a really good scene. I really like it.
Yeah, this whole scene with Davros, it feels like Davros is acting like Katori. Not to get too political on this show, but it feels like a Tory move.
Yeah. I also like the second that he leaves, we hear a bit more about Davros's plan, where he's like, we're gonna go work with the Thals to wipe out the Khaleds and turn the Khaleds into Daleks. I no longer care about Khaled people. I only care about Dalek people, and that's the way to go. And, you were saying earlier that you thought the first scene with Davros's right-hand man kind of gave away the twist of the next episode, that he's working with Davros the whole time. For me, I didn't experience that, because I think this scene put that seed of doubt in me, where he's got the line where he's like, you're gonna like wipe out all of the Khaled people, you'd go that far, where it's like that line of you'd go that far, where he's like, oh crap, hang on, I don't know if I would go that far, made me believe in the next episode that he would work against Davros. And then when that twist happens, spoilers for like 40 minutes from now, when that twist happens, I was like, oh damn, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, I forgot about the extent of this scene. I haven't seen this episode in a while, so forgive my bad memory of it. But yeah, it does plant the seeds of doubt. And when you know the twist of him working with Davros all along in the next episode, this scene now feels kind of out of place, doesn't it?
It feels weird that he would kind of like have this moment of doubt where he's like, hang on, you did go that far? Like he's like Davros's number one fan.
Yeah.
But it's a scene, I guess, more for the audience than for the plot. But then the Doctor and Harry are with the Khaleds. No, they're with the Thals now, coming up from underground hatch that leads directly into their base. Don't worry about how anybody gets to locations anymore, because the scripture doesn't. And the Doctor and Harry are then spying, listening in on a conversation Davros is having with the Thals through a cat flap in a door. Things stop. Like, I like the overall story and the conversations people are having, but the direction in which people get the information and how they get to the locations, I'm so confused by. Like,
Yeah, well, we're not even listening through the cat flap. The cat flap is just there for no reason, really.
yeah, but like they're like crouched down next to it, you know, so it's like maybe they're listening through it, but the cat flap is also closed. So, like,
I mean, a closed cat flap is like thin material, so I guess you could still.
I guess, but
why
it looks kind of metal. It looks like it's metal, but
Yeah.
like,
But why a cat flap? Is there a cat here? Do
know.
the fowls just have
Yeah.
pets? I hope like later on in the episode we'll see like there's the controls to an electric fence at like you know,
on
crawling
the ground.
level.
Yeah.
I hope a cat never fucking presses that by mistake, you know, because that is pretty low
Yeah.
down, and cats are apparently wandering around this facility.
yeah. There's just loads of cats. There's just loads of cats with the thals. Also, I just thought of what could have probably be much better staging for this. That would make a lot more sense. Is, you know, that hole in the ground they come up from?
Yeah.
Well, it's going to make as much sense as a hole in the ground's going to make. Why doesn't that hole in the ground come up inside the room that
Yeah.
Davros and the Thals are talking in? So that way the Doctor pop it open, they go, oh crap, Davros is here. And then they just kind of open it a crack and they listen in to the conversation that's going on. So they're spying onto this conversation underneath Davros without him realizing as he's talking about all this with the guys, rather than coming up, walking around a corridor,
Yeah.
knowing Davros is in the next room and listening through a cat flap. Like, that feels way more like what's going on than just the coincidence of they pop up in the same room.
Yeah,
you
like
know?
like he just opened up a scene on Davros talking to these foul soldiers, and then all of a sudden you
Yeah.
zoom down on the floor and you see the Doctor peeking his head above a hole in the ground. But yeah, that would have
Yeah,
worked so much
exactly.
better, but you know, you want to go back in time?
Yeah.
You want to go back 50
I would,
years?
yeah, I'll go back and we'll be like, okay, let's, what you've written is great, but what's going on is nonsense. But I really liked the scene with Davros and the Thals, because again, this episode is dark, and this gets way darker than I was expecting it to get, where Davros is talking with the Thals, and he's like, this here is the chemical plans. If you put these on your bombs, they will obliterate our shields and destroy our people. And the Thals are like, wait, hang on. You're just going to let us kill your own people. And Davros is like, I don't care about my people anymore. I just want peace. I just want to end the war. And my people are never going to end this war. You know, it has to be you to do this. And this is the last option we've got. And he's got a great line where he's like, there could be peace tomorrow. You know, we could be waking up to a peaceful planet tomorrow. And I'm like, God damn. The dialogue in this scene is just superb, you know, and the Thals being this, you know, pretty morally dark people where they're like, yeah, okay, we are gonna kill your people. You're giving this up. We're not gonna say no. We will wipe out your race. Like, if you give us that option, we will do it. You know, it's a really good scene. A really good scene.
Also, just the performance of Michael Wisher in his scene as Davros, putting on a performance is really good as well. It's just Michael Wisher is so good at that. Tom Baker was even like, I think Michael Wisher has this under control. I could leave the set and Michael Wisher could just sell the show completely because he's doing so well. Because a lot of the time, Tom Baker has to act against like glove puppets or whatever, but here he's like, here there's a capable actor who's able to carry the show. Like, no such wonder Davros has had such an impact on Doctor Who. You know, eight episode audio drama series. I need to listen to that.
Yeah. I mean, Davros is one of the most iconic, like, arch enemies of the Doctor for a reason, isn't he? You know, he's up there with the Master a lot of the time. You know, as like the arch villains of Doctor Who is the Master, and Davros is usually the second name in that conversation.
Yeah, what works so well about Davros is he's kind of the opposite of the Doctor, and we've covered like 4 episodes now this year about a villain being the opposite of the Doctor. With Time Ledger, he's the opposite of the Doctor because the Doctor doesn't want to change history. He wants the Time Ledger wants to change history. With the Enemy of the World, he's literally against himself, basically. And with Terra of the Autons, the Master is Moriarty to the Doctor. And here, Davros has the same scientific mind as the Doctor, but he has no moral compass, so this is what the Doctor could become if he had no moral compass, really.
Yeah, which is a cool way of looking at it, It's strange how similar he is, like, if you think, like, towards, like, mastery, because, the Master is very similar to the Doctor as well. And Davros, but I think they cover different shades, where the Master is like that adventuring side to the Doctor, where the Doctor could go on he could mess with time, he could mess with people, he could make himself a god if he wanted, whereas Davros is like the scientist side of the Doctor, where he could run these experiments, he could mutate people, he could make people, like, he could change the world for the better or the worse if he really wanted to, because he's a super genius. It's the different shades of the Doctor. It's why, like, it's the classic way of writing villains. It's why all the, like, Batman villains are super interesting, because they're all, like, shades of who Batman is presented in different ways. I don't know why I brought Batman up. It came to my mind. I just installed Arkham Asylum again, so I'm looking forward to playing that.
It reminds me of the Miracle of Sound song. You know what I'm talking about?
Miracle of Sound. Yes. I adore Miracle of Sound. Gav is one of my all-time favorite artists of all time. Absolute babe.
Their song about the Joker might be the best depiction of the Joker, I think, because it just nails it just nails what the Joker is to the Batman. It's perfect.
Yeah. Do you want to know a fun fact, Scott?
No.
Miracle of Sound is one guy.
Nice. Okay.
It's not a band. Gav does all the instruments, all the vocal. He does everything. It's a one-man show.
Okay,
it's
fair
incredible.
enough. Well, a one man can still be a band,
Yeah, so it's very famous, a one-man band.
Yes.
But yeah, no, Miracle of Sound, fantastic music. Highly recommend people listen to it.
To be fair, I've only listened to Batman songs because I'm not familiar with a lot of video games.
Wow, you suck. They do some TV stuff as well. They've got some of the Miracle of the Game of Thrones songs are very good, and they just very recently released a song about the boys.
Nice.
Oh God, absolutely fantastic.
We should help him write a song about Doctor Who.
Yeah, definitely. As long as the chorus is K9, that'll be sorted. But the episode continues as Davros and his right-hand man leave the meeting they're in with the Thals and immediately stop outside the door, which is some interesting staging as well, where they stop right outside the door and then they're like, ha ha ha, we were lying to them. They're going to do what they're going to do. They're going to kill our people, but they don't know our secret plan because we were lying to them the whole time. And what's great as well is if you look through the window of the door, you can see the Thals just standing still. They're just frozen statues. They're not doing anything. It's the staging is what lets this episode down a bit for me, I think, because I love the writing of this episode.
But that's a problem with doing the show on a multi-camera set, and you have to have them in the same set. We can't. It's very awkward. Yeah, the whole thing of the Thals just standing there like they're T-posing video game characters, just waiting to load or whatever. If this was made in the modern day, you could imagine this conversation being set, in the back seat of the car, because they obviously have to drive back.
There'll be movement. It'll be either in the back seat of the car or it'll be as they're walking towards the car. They'll be doing some sort of movement because that is directing 101.
Yeah, I just watched. Obviously, Andor came out like last year. And they have a lot of scenes of just people having conversation in the back of cars about their secret plans, but they can't reveal their secret plans because the people driving the car are the enemy, so they have to speak in code. I imagine if this was made today, they'd be speaking in code in the back of the car because the Thals are driving them back to their home base.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just a curse of the time it was made, really. But the Thals then come out and they say, okay, we're going to nuke your planet immediately, by the way. We're launching those bombs right this second. So we didn't even really wait or think about it. You gave us the go ahead, and we're doing it, which is great. It really shows how cool the Thals are. Then the Doctor and Harry walk up to two Simpsons characters, and the Doctor says, he's got a really funny line, I thought, where he's like, "Oh, can you help me out? I'm a spy," and then he just knocks the two guys' heads together, which is it's like a funny line. It's a peculiar line to say, like to them, but it's also some classic Doctor Who action where it is.
Oh, God, yes.
They couldn't afford a choreographer, so they were just like, you bash their heads together, and then everyone kind of went along with it.
A lot of it is that the Doctor can't be shown to be a violent person, and like the least violent way of doing it is something that the kids can actually do in real life. Because if you knock two people's heads together that hard in real life, it's not going to do anything. It's not going to knock them out.
No.
It reminds me.
It
reminds me of when I was at school. There was a thing where people would bash two heads together and make them kiss. Do you remember this? Did this happen at your school? Like
No, I don't think it did.
Like two people would be talking and you put their heads together and say, "You may now kiss the bride." That's something that happened at my school, and it was the dumbest shit ever.
What? That did not happen at my school. That sounds very strange. That's thrown me for a loop. I was about to say something. Oh my god, what was I about to say? Yeah, it's interesting that they didn't want the Doctor to be seen as a man of violence coming off the John Pertwee era.
True. Maybe the John Pertwee era was too violent for the Doctor, but even in the John Pertwee era, he would do the karate chop to the back of the head, which in real life wouldn't knock somebody out. So that's also...
Yeah, it's like the Vulcan death grip.
Yeah.
But then we cut to Sarah Jane, and she's like, "Oh my god, they're just gonna launch this rocket with us standing at the bottom, and we're gonna burn alive. They're gonna kill us." But it's okay because two other guards come in, knock out one of the guard that's here, but with a swift punch to the stomach, and they reveal themselves to be the Doctor and Harry. People are kind of teleporting at this point, and they're just really quickly getting all the characters back together because everybody got so separated, and they're like, "Oh wait, hang on, because we're nuking everything, we need to kind of get our characters together again and get everybody lined up where we need them to be." It's all right, and I don't think it detracts from the story in any way. It's just when you're talking about it and you're like, "Oh, suddenly this character's here, suddenly these characters are here." Like the show, that doesn't give you time to establish anything. You just kind of have to roll with the punches with this episode.
That's the problem with a lot of classic Doctor Who. Is there's a lot of going back and forth that they don't have the time or the budget or the sets to really show them properly going back and forth. So it's a lot of, "Oh, now I'm suddenly here and now the story can progress."
Yeah. It's like in was it The Time Meddler, where it cut to a close-up of William Hartnell, but he was in a different location?
Yes.
It's like, wait, hang on, we're in a different location now. Like, it's like super jarring transitions and stuff.
No, actually, it was just the Terror of the Autons, where you think John Pertwee is in the unit base, and then suddenly he's in the old lady's house.
He was in the old lady's house, actually. Yeah, that was what it was. Oh my god. Just amazing. What a great episode that was. But the Doctor gets the mutants and Sarah Jane and Harry to run away and go down the big hole that's in the hallway. For whatever reason, there's a hole in the hallway for her. They run down the hole, and a solid few seconds later, because people were, I guess, just a little bit late off the mark, guards come in and start firing bullets down like nobody's hell down that hole, which... I'll give this episode one thing. Like, whenever the guns are fired in this episode, I'm like, Christ, this kind of feels dark. Like, when the episode opens to that massive gunfire shooting at all the mutants and Sarah Jane and stuff, I was like, Jesus Christ, this is a terrifying way. And then when you've got two guards just unloading their guns down the pit that we've just watched our heroes escape down. Like, this is a violent episode, and I kind of dig it.
It's still not as bad as the opening of Resurrection of the Daleks, where all those fake policemen just fucking murder everyone inside.
Oh, yeah.
The very opening, like 10 characters die in the opening of Resurrection of the Daleks before we even meet the Doctor.
Yeah, Doctor Who. I mean, that's a classic Doctor Who story, though, isn't it? Just as every season got on, they just got more and more violent. Like, but then we cut to the Doctor trying to stop the rocket launch, and he ends up like touching a fence as the guard that he knocked out crawls along the floor and touches the turn on the electric fence button that's located on the stairs, on the ground of the stair. There's like a heap of it makes zero sense as to why that's there.
It's like they've had the experience of being knocked out so many times, so they just know that they need to install the buttons down there, but also the Doctor touching the fence doesn't make sense. Yeah, it's a lot of convenience.
Yeah, it is. It really is. It's a lot of, this is how we're ending this episode. The episode ends with the Doctor being electrocuted against the fence, which is not a terrible cliffhanger. It's a very, very much a classic style cliffhanger where it's how will the Doctor get out of this one? You'll need to tune in next week and see. It's much better than last episode's cliffhanger that was a freeze frame. It's nowhere near as good as the first episode's cliffhanger with the Davros reveal.
Agreed.
But that is the end of part 3 of this. So before we jump straight into part 4, what are your quick thoughts on this episode?
Yeah, pretty good episode, I would say. It begins to assemble the cast together again, you know. It ends the whole Sarah Jane on her own arc, which is a good thing because that was the least interesting stuff of the last 3 episodes.
Can you call it an arc? It's more of just like a wedge. It just kind of stopped any sort of story going on.
I enjoyed these. I don't hate any episode from Genesis of the Daleks. It's just weaker episodes, I think.
Yeah, I think that's fair as well. There's not been an episode where I felt bored so far. I've not seen parts 5 and 6 yet. There's just been bits where I'm like, oh, okay, this is what's going on. Like a giant clam. Remember there's a giant clam in this episode? It plays into no factors at all.
Yeah. you begin to think the clam is going to start singing or something.
I think this is a very tonally weird episode because it has those silly moments, but it's also a really grounded and really dark episode about Davros betraying his own people. And Davros betraying his own people, I think, is compelling as hell. I think it's so well written. I think it's so complex and casts so much actual depth onto the Khaled people, Davros himself, the Thal people. There's so much awesome world building happening here, and also giant clams. So really, it's got everything. I think this actually might be a perfect episode.
Yeah, the whole Davros stuff feels so mature for Doctor Who, which is the best possible move for, because a lot of kids, if you imagine kids starting a show out in 1963, they're going to be older now, and they're going to be less interested in Doctor Who. And I don't think newer kids would have been so interested in starting the show either. So you have to kind of get back that audience that may have not watched Doctor Who in a while and get them back into watching the show, and also get a whole new viewers getting back into the show, because you can't just cater towards kids all the time. So you need some kind of depth for the adults to be like, hey, this is actually a good show.
Yeah. I kind of like the idea of Doctor Who growing up with its audience,
Yeah.
Like as its audience grows and can understand more complex ideas, the show can start diving into some more complex ideas, and then you reach even more people from before. And sure, every now and then you can have a kiddie episode or a silly episode or whatnot, but you're also which is why I think Modern Who works so well.
Yeah.
Because Modern Who isn't afraid to do these complex, morally grey stories, or these scary, violent stories, or sometimes just the silly stories, where it's Nick Frost as Santa Claus. It's got a full spectrum of types of stories for them, which is one of the reasons why I think it's been so popular and such a great revival.
I feel the same way about Star Wars. We just had an episode of The Mandalorian where, we focused on that scientist dude. That was a big episode of The Mandalorian. And it's like the moral ethics of science, which is basically what Davros is doing here. There's a lot of parallel lines here. But the very latest episode, which is episode 6 of season 3, I think it was, was very silly, and a lot of people are like, oh, this show is just too childish. But Star Wars is a kids show. It's allowed to be childish, you know?
Yeah, it's, I've seen every episode of the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
And I think the Clone Wars is a brilliant show. I think because for the exact same reason. The Clone Wars has got some episodes where you're like, okay, this is a kid show I'm watching.
Yeah.
And then it's got some of the best political drama I've ever seen in my goddamn life. It's got some of the best character writing, some of the best action scenes I've ever seen, some of the most complex characters I've ever seen in my life. And then it'll have an episode where Jar Jar Binks goes and fucks a lady while Mace Windu's there. Like, it's a wild show. It's phenomenal. Absolute. God, the Clone Wars is so goddamn good.
Who watches the Clone Wars when?
Oh yeah, God, there's so many things so many shows I want to talk about. But let's continue talking about this show. We're not quite done yet, as we dive in to Genesis of the Daleks, Part 4.
Welcome back.
You were right, Sarah, about there being something nasty waiting for us.
I have read the initial reports of your interrogation. The suggestion that you have traveled through space and time was utterly dismissed by the computer analysis.
I imagine it had never been programmed for such a concept.
Precisely. However, I am perhaps more flexible. Though the power of such travel is beyond my scientific comprehension, it is not beyond my imagination. Why did you come here?
To stop the development of the Daleks.
Why?
Because having lived in what you would call the future, I have seen the carnage and destruction they have caused.
Then my Daleks do go on. They do survive.
Yes, as weapons of hate and machines of war.
Fascinating.
But there's still time to change all that. Why not make them a force for good throughout the universe?
I could do it.
Then do it. Be remembered for that.
You have seen my Daleks in battle?
Many times. I've fought against them.
And do they win? Do they always win?
Not always. They have been defeated, but never utterly defeated. The Dalek menace always remains.
If, as you say, they become the supreme creatures of war, how can they lose? How can they fail?
Misfortune, lack of information, sometimes overwhelming opposition.
Yes, but tell me, how do the Daleks fail?
No, Davros. That is a question that the future must keep secret.
What mistakes do they make? You will tell me?
No.
You will tell me?
No, I will not!
Episode 4 begins in the exact place we left off at episode 3, with the Doctor being electrocuted. And what's actually interesting here is the Doctor isn't saved in any way. He just passes out, which I think is a kind of a refreshing twist on the cliffhangers, because my biggest complaint every time we watch Classic Who, I say it every time, is and the Doctor gets saved by this happening, or the Doctor gets to resolve this, or it's a fake out from this. But no, this time he just straight up passes out. He passes out and he wakes up arrested. He wakes up arrested by the Thals.
Yeah.
As the timer is counting down to the launch of their rocket, and he just looks drained. He looks depressed, and he looks dead.
Do you want to know?
There's nothing. He's powerless.
Do you want to know why there's no resolution to the cliffhanger? Because it wasn't supposed to be a cliffhanger.
Amazing.
And the cliffhanger
That's a classic move.
The cliffhanger was supposed to be the Doctor's reaction to the rocket ship getting blown up and be like, oh no, Harry and Sarah are in there. That was the cliffhanger, but I think the last episode overran somehow. There was the whole clam thing.
Yeah. Like just get rid of the clam bit and you're fine. And it's like, yeah, that's weird. But I think it works better that way, honestly. But then we cut to Davros playing a game of Among Us, as him and all his scientists are like, somebody betrayed our people, somebody gave away our secrets that only us knew. And Davros is like, well, it wasn't me. I was in the engine room working on the engines, so it couldn't have been me. And that guy was with me, so he can vouch for me. Like,
Yeah, you're one. Yeah.
He's just trying to make people not think it was him, even though he's about to murder them all anyway.
Very sus.
But we then cut. Yeah, it is sus behavior. He was a red. He was definitely the red Among Us guy, for sure. But we then cut back to the Doctor as he's watching this rocket launch, and he tries to stop it because for some reason the Thals installed a launch button and a self-destruct button next to themselves. So like if they were like, okay, we're gonna launch our nuclear missile. I hit the wrong button. Now we're all dead. I don't know why you would do that. Like
They're also huge buttons, and it's only 2 buttons.
Yeah.
So it's so easy to make a mistake.
They were like, okay, we either want to launch this or we want to just blow ourselves up, and why would they ever want to blow themselves up? Why not launch it? What scenario do they not need to launch a missile? Like, but the Doctor is powerless to stop the missile launching, and the Khaled city burns. It completely explodes and burns, and the Doctor's got a great line where he's like, I sent Harry and Sarah there, which you said is supposed to be the cliffhanger. I think it just works as a poignant line by itself, you know?
Yeah.
It's just like a really dark moment in this episode, and it's fantastic. I really enjoy how, as this story goes on, it's getting progressively more darker, you know?
Yeah. And also, again, the whole Thals committing genocide shows that there's no good side in wars. There's no black or white. It's so good. It's so nuanced. Very rare for classic Doctor Who.
It is. This is definitely becoming quite a standout episode. You know, I think I don't know if enough people know about this episode. I don't think enough people talk about how good this episode is. But then we cut back to Davros with his Daleks as he's like, oh my god, our people have died. God, this is a moment that's going to be down in history. And, you know, everyone's now going to become a Dalek, and we're going to kill that scientist there because he's the one that betrayed us. Throw him out into space. And the scientist guy is like, it's the Superman scientist. He's like, no, it wasn't me. Davros, no, wow, what are you doing? And then he gets zapped by the Daleks, which you said is the first on-screen death of the Daleks in this. I mean, in this story. Not ever, yeah. Obviously. Yeah.
But when I said it was the first death to the Daleks, it's because obviously this is the Daleks Genesis
in canon.
In canon, basically. I like how the Daleks. I like how the Daleks are introduced through Shadow when they're coming down the corridor. It's such a good way to reintroduce them to the story, because the Daleks in Genesis of the Daleks aren't really there, you know?
Yeah, they're not really proper Daleks yet.
Yeah.
You know, like they're not properly the full mutants yet. They're not got all their emotions wiped yet because Davros is just putting these plans in. They're basically robotic shells that Davros is controlling. You know, it's like the body of a Dalek without the Dalek brain inside.
Which is, that's exactly one of the complaints about people who don't like this episode. I think it was less popular when it first came out because the idea of the Daleks basically doing nothing because of Davros being the front and center was kind of upsetting to some people. I can see why, because the Daleks were really good, really famous characters, villains, but now that they're like in the back seat, getting controlled by Davros, and every story from now on to the end of the classic series has to focus on Davros rather than the Daleks. A lot of people think this is like the downside to the Daleks. They don't think the Daleks are effective anymore, which I disagree with, but
you know, it reminds me of it. Makes me think of Darth Vader. Because you know, Darth Vader in the original trilogy is this dark, imposing character, you know, and he's this big, scary robot man. But then you kind of find out that this big, scary robot man's getting led by this dude who likes to sit in a chair and looks an awful lot like Davros, called the Emperor. You know, and the big scary robot man's actually not a big scary robot man. He's just a dude, a sad dude. Okay, and then these other movies come out and they tell you that this big scary robot man is actually this like an experienced kid who's really angry and really upset and has a really hard life and gets manipulated by people and taken advantage of. And it's a tragedy. It's a sad story. It's not a big, scary, imposing villain. And a lot of people didn't like that because they wanted Darth Vader to be Darth Vader. He wants to be badass and cool. Where really Darth Vader is a sad story. It's a tragedy of a man that gets completely ruined by the society he's in, you know? And I think the Daleks are similar because, you know, when the Daleks first come, they're just kind of faceless enemies. They're just, oh, these are big bad robots. They're kind of we're kind of alluding to Nazis in them, but like, you know, we're still not fully saying anything. They're just scary for the kids to be scared at and have fun sci-fi adventures. When you bring in Davros and stuff and you start talking about like, oh, he's murdering his own people, he's manipulating his own people, he's messing with the genes of his own people to turn them into these killing machines, I think it makes the Daleks way more of a tragedy, way more of a nuanced villain, way more, you know, than just a straight up haha exterminate, you know.
Yeah. And also, by this point, the Daleks have been featured in like 70 episodes of classic Doctor Who, so there's a point where you need to shift the focus and, you know, renew the energy.
Expand.
Yeah, expand.
You know, do something refreshing with it, something new. Take a risk.
Which is why I liked when Chibnall finally got around to the Daleks, because he did something very interesting where his very first Dalek episode, at least, where the Dalek is kind of out of its shell and starts controlling that lady. That was really good Dalek stuff.
Great episode. It's a really good episode. It is far and away the best New Year episode. But also I want to talk about the actual the death of the guy. You know, it's the classic invert the colors of the dude being zapped by the Daleks. But I there's something about it in this episode where it's kind of terrifying when the colors invert and you see the people being like, ah, and like, you know, I can just imagine being a kid and you're watching this Doctor Who story and it's way darker than normal.
Yeah.
It's dealing with way more adult issues. And then suddenly these people are being zapped. Like, this is a terrifying story if you're a kid watching this when it first airs. Like, it would be incredible. Like,
oh god, yeah, it's nightmare fuel for sure. I can understand the complaints that came out of this episode. And also, I don't remember how I mentioned this last episode, but this is the first time you actually see, when a Dalek shoot, you actually see the rays. It's because we talked about it in the Dalek movie episode we did last year. It's because the technology to do that kind of overlay was in America, and it was too much money to try and ship over the film to America to get the special effect overlaid onto the film. And also the technology didn't exist in the UK yet, but this is the very first time they could actually do it, apparently. Which, it's so weird going back to classic Who and not seeing the rays when the Dalek shoots.
Yeah.
It's very strange.
Something we just kind of take for granted with the modern Daleks, isn't it? As they just fire big laser beams, you know? But we then cut to the Doctor with the Thals, and they're adding even more layers of depth to the Thals. Is the leader of them is like, well, we've just committed genocide, so let's release all of the prisoners we've got, and we're going to drop all charges against them. Everybody's free to go. The war is over. You know, let's move on. Let's live in a time of peace now. You know, we'll show that we are a kind, gentle people after nuking their people. Like, the Khalids aren't fully dead. There's Khalid prisoners, more than just the Doctor, clearly, with the Thals, because the Thal leader's like, let's release all of our prisoners and drop charges. So what are these Khalid people going to be doing?
Yeah.
You know, they're just released and told to go back to your life and pretend like nothing has happened. Pretend like we didn't drop a nuclear bomb on your people. You know?
Exactly.
Terrible.
Yeah, there is no morality to the Thals in this story. They just suck.
They are bad people.
But also, I love this scene
then,
because the Doctor is obviously so defeated and just so glum about the fact that, you know, he just lost his two companions. They both died, apparently. The Thals just committed genocide against the Khalids, and, you know, obviously the fucking Davros is winning now. and just the Doctor's so defeated, and yet it's underscored by the applause from the Thals. It's such a great...
Yes.
It's so good. I love it.
It is extremely, extremely well done. And the scene continues as the Doctor is then introduced to random female Thal lady in a pretty pointless scene that's just there to establish her coming back later on in the episode, where she's chatting with the Doctor and she's like, Davros is such a good guy. He helped us nuke all of his people to death. And the Doctor's like, a good guy wouldn't do that. He's not a good guy. He's going to kill you with Daleks.
Yeah. But yeah, this is the introduction to only the second female character in this entire story. In the most iconic Doctor Who stories, there's only 2 female characters. Shocking.
Yep, and even at that, calling them characters is a stretch.
Yeah.
Because they don't do anything.
So she was actually supposed to be a male in the script, but she was changed to be a female instead. The character was supposed to die, but Robert Holmes didn't like the idea of female characters dying for some reason, which is interesting.
Women don't die. Women live forever. Yeah.
But yeah, and also
God knows. That's some 1970s logic, isn't it?
Yeah, and also just thinking about the crew working on this episode, there's no females either. So Liz Sladen and this woman are the two ladies.
Jesus.
It's really sad.
Yeah, that must have sucked. Yeah, that was sucked. That's depressing. But speaking of depressing, the episode continues as we cut to Davros going over to one of his scientist, general, soldier, Nazi men, and he's like, you need to add these mutations to our Dalek embryos immediately. And the guy's like, but this is gonna ruin their brains. This is gonna give them developmental problems. And he's like, no, it's going to give them advantages. So, we're gonna get rid of their emotion, get rid of anything like that, turn them into killing machines, do it at once, and stop questioning me. At this point, Davros he's getting almost like maniacal with the way that he talks. He's yelling everything.
Yeah, Michael Wisher is just so good in these scenes. I love him so much. He's so good.
He is great. Which, to be fair, the 2 Davros episodes that we've actually covered, I've loved both of them. I think Davros has given amazing performances in both episodes, which obviously different actors in those episodes. So I'm yet to see a bad Davros. I'm sure there's one out there.
I mean, the next time we see Davros in The Destiny of the Daleks is probably the worst Davros appearance, because the mask just doesn't fit, and the guy is trying his best, but he's no Michael Wisher or Terry Malloy or Julian Beach. I think he's the weakest Davros, but yeah, that's definitely the worst Davros episode, the next one.
Interesting. We then cut to back to the Thals as we see them all celebrating and having a good time, and then they get mowed down by Daleks. And you may ask yourself, where did the Daleks come from? How did the Daleks get to the Thal base? How did they get to this base without anybody noticing them coming in? These are all questions that you don't want to ask, because you're not going to get an answer to them.
Oh yeah, it does make sense. And also the Doctor he hides behind a corner basically with the only other lady in the episode, and one of the Daleks, 3 Daleks cross the frame, but one Dalek gets stuck. He almost tips over.
You watch it like tip, like stays at the camera, and then everyone's just kind of looking at it, and then it wheels again. It's like, oh, that was a bit of tension right there. It almost ruined the entire shot.
Yeah.
You imagine if it fell over and they had to reset. That would have cost them so much.
Yeah, nightmare. And yeah, it proves why the director did not want to do exterior scenes with the Daleks. Like, no wonder it's not even good in studio.
Yeah. We then cut back to Davros, who's yelling at all of his scientists, basically saying, all we are doing is Daleks now. Daleks, Daleks, Daleks. Stop everything out. Dalek time. Daleks. And it's very good. we then go back to the Doctor and the woman that he's with. Does she have a name? I haven't caught a name yet. I don't remember her even saying what her name is.
You know, between... I'll look on Wikipedia to see if she has a name. We'll get to that.
I'm sure she'll have a name in the script.
Yeah.
You know, but she's short blonde-haired lady.
Yeah. She looks like
she's like, you know, why?
She looks like she would be cast as Peter Pan.
Yeah, like a stage play of Peter Pan.
Yes.
Yeah, like a pantomime. Yeah. But she's like hiding next to like a wall or something with the Doctor, and she's like, why haven't our people surrendered? I feel like if we were under this much of an attack, our people would surrender. And the Doctor's like, maybe they did surrender, but the Daleks don't listen to surrender. The Daleks will just kill indiscriminately. Which again, just adds even more great layers of darkness to this episode. Even more pain and misery.
Do you want to know her name? It's Foul Soldier.
Yes. Wow, she doesn't have a name.
No, but to be fair, there's like 4 Foul Soldiers here, and there's even the Time Lord that was a messenger to the Doctor is only known as Time Lord Messenger. There's also Khaled Leader. So not a lot of names going on in this script.
Interesting. Maybe Terry Nation's not good at coming up with names. And he's
To be fair, these are nobodies. We don't need to give them names.
Yeah, I know, but it just adds that bit more humanity to them, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know, this person that's working with the Doctor, she's with the Doctor for multiple scenes, and he doesn't be like, what's your name? I give this bit of humanity, this bit of something that you can connect with them a little bit more.
In this episode, she's probably with the Doctor more than Sarah Jane in the last 3 episodes.
Yeah, legit. Probably got more to do as well. But we then get a really nice shot of a Dalek going overhead them, and the sky is like purple and full of smoke. It's such a vibe. The entire shot is a vibe. Like, it's so stylized and cool and sci-fi and dark, and it's just brilliant. It's brilliant. And
it's perfectly lit, so like the Dalek is mostly in shadow. And, obviously the sky is burning with orange as well as purple. It's really well lit, and I really like it. Whoever did the lighting for this episode did such a great job with it.
For sure. Then the Doctor is underground again. Don't worry about how he got there. And he's getting attacked by some mutos. And they just kind of wail on him for a while until eventually Harry and Sarah Jane run out of nowhere to save the Doctor. And I thought it was strange that the Doctor, although I guess I kind of thought myself out of it before I even said it. I was about to say I thought it was strange that the Doctor basically just gives up and curls up into a ball. But at the same time, this is the Doctor where he thinks his companions are dead.
Yeah.
He thinks he's failed to stop the Daleks. He thinks Davros has won. At this point, he has basically given up. Like, you can see it on his face the entire episode. He is miserable,
Yeah. But also... one of the mutos has a giant rock, and he's outnumbered.
Looks like a clam.
So he's just protecting his head, which is the best course of action you would do in this scenario. Like, protect your head at all costs.
Yeah. Also, the giant rock looks like a clam. It looks like a small clam. But yes, the episode continues from there. What timestamp are you at?
10:54.
10:54. Oh yeah, hang on. He talks with Harry and Sarah Jane about how they need to get the time bracelet back. You forgot that was a thing, didn't you? I sure did, because they didn't talk about it for a whole episode. Like, I was like, oh yeah, that thing. We need that thing, don't we? It's really kind of fell to the back burner.
Yeah, we could have easily just asked the white-haired Kryptonian dude, could you get the time ring for us, please? Because we kind of need it. And also the whole reason why the Kryptonian dude died so early on in this episode was because he was obviously supposed to die last episode, so that we wouldn't need to pay him for this episode. But obviously plans got shifted around. He got paid for this episode. He got paid more, which is cool at least.
Good for him. Yeah, great for him. That's good for him. The episode continues as we cut to some scientists all plotting to betray Davros, basically saying, like, if we can get everybody to turn against Davros, there's nothing he can do. You know, we can't allow him to continue wiping out the emotions in the Daleks because that's completely immoral. That goes against everything we believe in. Which, again, adding depth and shade to the Khaled people. Fantastic. But it turns out that Davros's best right-hand buddy is listening in. Oh no, that is not good. Or is it? Who knows? As we then cut to the Doctor squeezing through some bars. But he doesn't need to squeeze through them because he was so big and strong before. He's opened them wide enough for everybody to fit in comfortably. As they step through, the Doctor stops his Muto friend, though, and says, go join the resistance group fighting the Daleks so that you can die and we can live. And you'll meet a lady I was working with who actually does have a name, we find out. She's called, what, Beton?
Yeah, Beton. See,
Beton,
I got
yes.
confused because I was looking for a woman's name on the cast list, and there's somebody called Hilary Minister, which I automatically assumed was a woman, but it's a man. So I got confused, which is, I think you can say it's fair enough.
Well, you know, it's the famous saying about making assumptions continues to live on. You know, is why you shouldn't assume, because you make an ass out of you and me.
Especially you. That's why I
bastard.
do it. I want to make you look like an ass by association.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to, like, professionally remove myself from you at some point for sure.
Oh yeah, by the way, you want to know what TV show this woman also appeared in? Take a guess.
Blake Seven.
Yes, well done. How did you ever guess?
Yeah, I'm so smart. I'm so smart. The Doctor and that walk through the bars, and they continue through the underground layers as we hear the moaning of the clams. The clams. Also, I really like the idea that, because you know how the clams are like discarded experiments of Davros, that at some point he was as a fervent believer that the way to defeat the Thals and the way for the Khaled race to live longer and be better than everybody else was through clams. And I love the idea, the way that he screams about Daleks and the way that he screams about their superiority. He was doing the same with clams before.
Yeah.
You know, he's like, the clams are the way, the clams. Like, it's such a strange choice to use clams. Why?
Yeah.
What an inefficient animal to choose to try to defeat your enemies with.
And it's basically the only failed experiment we see. We saw like a dinosaur walk by, like last episode 2. There's a dinosaur and a clam. I feels like there's more inventiveness you can come up with than just that. You know, there's more ideas.
Yeah. But I don't know if you need more ideas because clams is so perfect. Like if I think like what's the ultimate deadly animal that we have on our planet, you know, the ultimate thing that could crumble nations, it's clams. And it's like, I don't know how you come to any conclusion other than clams.
Fair enough.
We then cut to back to the science man as he is meeting, or he's having a conversation with Davros' right-hand man, who's like, by the way, I overheard what you were saying, and I agree with you. Where can we meet and quietly and to be able to discuss what our plan is going to be? Which, me being the fool I am, I actually fell for this. I actually fell for the twist of this guy.
I'll be honest.
Faking him turning good.
I kind of keep falling for it too, even if I've seen this episode like 8 times. I keep falling for it, just momentarily.
It is very. I think it's very well done because they've cast enough doubt on whether or not this guy is a fervent believer in Davros or whether he's a fervent believer in the Khaled people. And at this point, Davros isn't working for the Khaled people; he's working for the Daleks. You know.
Also, what works here is the fact that all the Khaleds are turning against Davros, and you kind of expect it to keep happening with, every Khalid will be coming against Davros. So when one Khalid is working with Davros, it comes as a surprise.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very well done. Speaking of things well done, we then cut to more clams as the Doctor and Sarah Jane and Harry walk into a room full of clams.
Mathew.
And then the most... Yeah.
I've come up with a good title for this episode.
Oh, yeah? What?
Silence of the Clams.
I hate it. But I can't think of a better title, so but the Sarah Jane and that walk into a room full of clams, and some of the worst stage direction I've ever seen in classic Who happens, because the clams aren't moving, they're not a threat. And then Sarah and Harry are like, whoa, my God. And then Sarah like runs up to one and then stumbles back and then almost falls backwards into it. And I'm like, what is happening? What is going on that's making you act like this? Just walk around them. Like, it's so absurdly out of place in this episode and feels like tacked on. It's unbelievable.
It reminds me of the Mountain of Everest story from the Mr. Show. Have you ever seen Mr. Show?
No, I've not, unfortunately. Mr. Show is one of those shows I've wanted to watch, but I've just never found the time to do it.
When we've done this, I'm going to send you a really good sketch, because it's a sketch where this dude is telling a story of him climbing Mount Everest, but every time he tells the story, he keeps falling over. and there's like thimbles on the wall, and he keeps knocking over the thimbles on the wall, and you have to keep picking it up. And then the story becomes the story of how he tells the story, but he keeps knocking shit over. It's a really good sketch, but it reminds me of, there's no reason for him to keep falling, but it reminds me of Sarah Jane here.
Yeah, where she is literally, she's like, just like, whoa. That is so stupid.
Anyone just look
line.
up Mr. Show with Bob and David, the Mountain of Everest sketch, and you'll find it on YouTube. It's really funny, worth watching. But pause this episode and come back to it once you've watched it, and listen to the end of this episode as well, please. Thank you very much.
Yes. And then there's a really stupid line where Sarah Jane's like, and I'm never eating oysters again. Gah. I hate it. I hate everything to do with clams in this episode. But Harry, the Doctor, and Sarah Jane then climb through some venting as we cut away to the science man walking through some dark, spooky corridors looking for Davros's right-hand man. Eventually he finds him, and just the reveal of this dude standing in the dark against a wall with a grin on his face is terrifying. Like, it is a scary shot.
And, if I was the science dude, I'd be like, this is a bit suspicious. Why are you just standing in the dark?
I'm gonna die.
This?
You just go into the room like, oh, I'm dead. I'm dead, aren't I? You've got me. I'm dead.
And also, he has his iron cross back on him, which he won't have in the next scene. This is because this scene was shot around the same time as episodes 1 and 2. So obviously, after episode 2, they made the decision to get rid of the iron cross, but now it's here again, which is, it's very distracting. Like, if you make a decision, just stick to it.
I think it's strange to be making costume decisions when you're already starting to film.
Yeah.
Like, for me, if we were shooting and we had already done 2 episodes where he had the cross on, it's too late. He has the cross on for the rest of the episodes.
Yeah,
we're not suddenly deciding he's taking it off. That's such a strange decision to make. But this scene, I really, really, really like this scene. It's I think maybe my standout scene in the 2 episodes, simply because it was a twist I didn't see coming, and I think the performances are amazing. Where the right hand man is chatting with the scientist, and he's like, I'm going to try and get the army on our side. We're going to take Davros down. We're going to do this. Who can you bring to the table? Who's supporting us so far? Like, who's already on board? And the science guy lists off a bunch of names that he's got helping, and then immediately the demeanor and the voice of the right-hand man changes to become way more robotic, and he's like, thank you, that's all I needed. And Davros comes out of the shadows, and he's like, haha, you're gonna die. And that performance switch from being like this panicked, like, okay, we can take down Davros, to actually, I'm just a drone, I am just working with Davros, I have no humanity in me at all, is amazing. Absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, like I said, his performance, I think the whole performance from the guest cast in this story is really solid across the board. But his performance is really good, and also just the reveal of Davros silhouetted in the darkness with only his light. To be fair, why didn't the guy see Davros's light in this scene?
Don't worry about it.
The one time it works and the guy doesn't see it.
Yeah, and they like kill the dude, or they like knock him out at least. The guy karates him in the back of the neck. And he asks Davros if he should kill him, and Davros is like, no, we're gonna just get rid of those emotions that are making him act this way. You know, he's got such a brilliant scientific mind. We're gonna let him keep his scientific mind and get rid of those stupid emotions.
Yeah,
which is just terrifying. It's just I love how awful Davros is in these episodes.
It also reminds me of Planet of the Apes, where we just lobotomize every human.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Such a terrifying thought.
We then they find out that people are climbing through the ventilation shaft, and they capture the Doctor, Sarah Jane, and Harry, and just immediately start torturing them, really. And again, it leads to a scene I really, really like, where Davros is talking to the Doctor, and he's like, the computer doesn't think you could possibly be from the future. I'm willing to entertain that idea that you're from the future. You know, even if the idea of time travel is beyond anything I could ever create, I'm willing to accept somebody else could create it. And, you know, tell me about my Daleks. What are they like in the future? Have they ever been defeated? And the Doctor's like, oh yeah, they've been defeated before. You know, they've caused so much pain and awful and suffering, and they always come back. But they've been defeated before, which sends Davros basically mad, where he's like, how could that be? How could my Daleks be? You've got to tell me what their weakness is. And leads him to just start torturing people, or threatening to torture Sarah Jane if the Doctor doesn't reveal this information to him. And Harry, to a lesser extent, because nobody cares about Harry. But I think that this scene is excellent. It plays into all the stuff that I really like when it comes to classic Doctor Who, and when it comes to just storytelling in general. I love it when you have two morally opposed characters, they sit in a room and they talk. It's fantastic to me.
And this is the first proper time Davros and the Doctor actually meet, you know. Like, we were in the same room before, but we didn't really interact. Here, we're finally talking to each other. And every Davros and Doctor scene always seems to be just absolutely perfect. There's not a single bad one, from the Capaldi episode, which I'm kind of mixed on. I don't hate the Capaldi episode. I'm just mixed on it.
Sure. And
also, even when we did Resurrection of the Daleks, the scenes with Peter Davison and Davros were the best parts of that muddled story.
The episode then continues as we cut to the Thal soldiers with the Mutos hanging out in the trenches, basically being like, you know, we're gonna die, but we're gonna just rest and wait here before we go into battle. And the Mutos being like, what? No, we need to attack now. Which, you know, just kind of shows their two opposing ways of dealing with this.
Yeah.
You know, and they're having to work together after being enemies for so long. It's great. It's really good. It's not the best stuff in the episode. Whenever the Mutos show up, it's not the best stuff in the episode, but it's fine.
It feels like they could have cut out some of the CLAMS stuff to develop like 10 extra minutes of the Mutos and the Thals, you know.
How could you cut out the CLAMS stuff? It's like the most pivotal stuff in the story. Like, but, the CLAMS stuff is what ties this whole plot together.
But seriously, I do understand the need for filler in a 6-part story, but it feels like you could fill those filler parts with some more character development. I don't know why.
I don't. Yeah, that's it. That's it. I don't know why you need to have filler in a 6-part story, because you could use 6 parts to your advantage and be like, oh my god, I can explore this world more. I can do more stuff. I can have more conversations rather than they just fight clams for 10 minutes, whatever. You know?
Yeah. It's really silly.
Although
isn't
I guess that's kind of like what happens like when you have a writer that's in charge of writing like 17 episodes in a season, you know, where they're like, I don't have time to sit and worry about fleshing out this B story. I just need to hit 20 pages in this script. And the way I'm going to hit 20 pages is then they fight some clams. And then I've got to move on to my next script immediately. You know, like it was such a different approach to producing television, where it was more of a day job thing and less of you're doing it because you just love writing, you know?
And also you need to consider the children audience. If you include more scenes
they didn't
of
consider
dialogue,
the children. They didn't consider the children audience in this episode. So.
like if you include more scenes of dialogue, the children are going to switch off and become bored. But if you include clams being scary or whatever, they're going to be more interested in theory. In theory.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I think you can make dialogue interesting for children. You know, it's all about presentation, but doing some spooky clams is the easiest option, I guess. But our last scene in the episode is just more torture with Davros, where he's like, "You will tell me," and he's just yelling that at the top of his lungs as the doctor's like, "If I tell you I betray millions of people, it's not going to happen." And Sarah Jane's like, "Don't tell him, just let him do whatever he's going to do." And it's a really dark way to end this episode, as we just zoom in to Davros's face as he's screaming at the doctor. And, you know, Davros is a pretty spooky looking dude, and I imagine this costume back in the 70s would have been terrifying. You know, you see like his black teeth and everything as he's yelling. Fantastic episode. I really like this one.
Yeah, and also I think the cliffhanger is a little bit weak. I feel like the cliffhanger should have been, you know, Davros turns up the dial and both Harry and Sarah are just in so much pain, and there's your cliffhanger. You know, the characters are in peril, whereas it's just Davros shouting over and over again. I feel like it's lacking something.
It doesn't really feel like a cliffhanger. It feels more like the episode just suddenly comes to an end halfway through a scene, you know? Which is kind of a classic Who move as well. Sometimes there are no cliffhangers. Sometimes an episode just kind of ends.
Sometimes the cliffhangers are the friends we've made along the way.
Yeah, sometimes the cliffhangers are the clams we've made along the way.
You have to have clams in the title.
And that is Genesis of the Daleks Part 3 and 4. So overall, Scott, we're halfway through this story now. You know, we've just finished the midpoint. You know, what do you think? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm digging the hell out of it. It's as good as it's ever been. Every time I rewatch this is probably my most rewatched classic Doctor Who story. I've seen it like 7 or 8 times by now. And it's just real. Every time I feel like every time I feel like I get something new out of it, because when I first saw it, I was just a kid, and I was like, oh my god, they're Nazis. But this time I'm really analysing the facts. But you know, every group of characters isn't black or white. It's just they all have depth, and there's so much to analyse.
Shades of grey.
Yeah,
Shades of grey.
50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, so many. And this is obviously my first time going through it. And I am very much enjoying it as well. I really like character stuff, and I think that so far this is what the story's done really well, is present interesting character stuff and present a depth that we've not had, and a depth that we've not had at all this year going through the Doctor Who in chronological order, you know, with the Doctors. You know, the first Doctor, there was no real depth to the Time Meddler. It was an interesting concept more than anything. And then what was our second Doctor story? I've already forgotten.
The Enemy of the World.
Enemy of the World, there was some interesting depth to that, you know, with the idea of this benevolent leader, but is he actually benevolent or whatever? But that story also had its own issues that were separate from what the actual depth to it. But that was another really well written episode. And then Terror of the Autons was silly. A silly time.
Yeah.
And this is such a juxtaposition, I think, to Terror of the Autons. Where instead of blue screen, we're on a set. Instead of silly B acting and B characters, we've got really well written, really well performed characters, which I think just helps shows the versatility of Doctor Who. The variety that you get. It's such an amazing show. And I'm definitely enjoying this story.
There is so many types of stories you can get out of this show, and this is just proven. 12 seasons in, this is episode 500 of whatever. Crazy to think about, but yeah, this is episode 500 or something, and you're still finding new areas to explore in the Whoniverse, which, is important. You can't rely on the same old tropes every time. You need to change.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is just very, very, very good character stuff. And what I like about it as well is there's so much to chew on. There's so much to think about, so much motivation, so many, betrayals, so much things actually happening that make it super, super compelling. Definitely some good TV, some good writing, and just some good sci-fi. And I'm excited to see what parts 5 and 6 give us when we visit that next week. But until then, you can find our show on YouTube at Who Watches Who, where it is available in video form. It's also available in audio form wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are listening to this in audio form, why don't you leave us a review? Reviews go a really long way in actually helping promote the show. It's strange, I know, and I don't fully understand why, but the more reviews a show has, the more it gets recommended into other people's podcast feeds, and the more likely people are to find and support the show, which is really what we want. We want more people to chat Doctor Who with, more people to listen and celebrate the show that we all really like. So if you can, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or Podcast Addict or whatever podcasting app you use, and that will be fantastic for the show. And if you're watching this on YouTube, just leave a comment down below. Leave a like, share the video if you can. The more engagement we have, the better it is for the show in a whole, and that's really good and fun stuff. You can find us on Twitter at WatchesDoctor, and you can find us on Facebook at Who Watches Who, if for all of your podcast updating needs. It's where I post a bunch of links. And on Twitter, we're pretty engaged on Twitter at the minute, posting memes and replying to people and having a jolly old time on that hellscape of a website. You can find me on Twitter at Cloth223. And you could also send us an email if you liked at whowatcheswhopod@gmail.com, and we will read that out at the end of the month in our monthly news roundup podcast, as well as any comments we get on our YouTube. And I think that's all the plugs I've got.
Yep.
I think. Next week we will be back wrapping up Genesis of the Daleks with parts 5 and part 6. But until then,
Bye.
bye.